Hello and welcome to Launerin's Gamerscore and welcome to my Final Fantasy VII Remake review. So I'm going to be talking in some depth about the game in this video, so there are going to be a lot of spoilers, both big and small, relating to both the original game and to the remake. The footage in the background is going to be footage from early on in the game, so that won't really be as spoilery. So I'm just going to start off, I suppose, by talking about the original game. That started off with you going through one reactor, and then you basically go back to Tifa's bar, you do the next reactor, which would lead to you meeting Ares. Then after meeting Ares, you'd do War Market. After War Market, you were climbing the pillar and doing that bit. And after the pillar, you were climbing the wall up to Shinra Tower, up Shinra Tower, fight Rufus, do the bike stuff, and you were done. As we've shown on this video, that takes somewhere around 4 hours to get that done, probably a little bit quicker if you want to push it. I managed to hit 32 hours in the remake, which basically takes us up to the same point-ish. So the first thing that I want to say is, as somebody that is into video games and looking at this game from an outside perspective, it's a good game. It's a solid game, it's got a solid story, etc, etc. Brilliant, great, wonderful.
Job's a job.
However, and it's a big however, as a fan of Final Fantasy VII, playing this game, I was a little bit disappointed. So basically there's been a lot of changes to the story in order to make it kind of flow a little bit better and to stretch it out. A lot of these changes basically include details from the game that you're basically not supposed to know yet, for example, there's a lot of stuff about who Cloud really is, there's a lot of stuff about who Zack is and how he relates to it, and there's a lot of stuff heavily centered around Sephiroth as well, including, and this is obviously I've already said, but these are big spoilers that I'm dropping, these are endgame spoilers. You do fight Sephiroth shortly before the end of the game. The end of the game doesn't finish where I thought it was going to finish, with the fight against the big robot. And then you kind of abseil off the bridge. That doesn't happen anymore. There's now an entirely new sequence, which, as far as I can take away, is basically the group trying to break destiny so that they can go after Sephiroth and change what he's going to do in order to save the planet. Which is a lot different from the original plot of the game, which essentially for this section of the game was just fighting against Shinra. Some of the bits in the game, so there were a lot of side quests and stuff. These were basically put in to stretch the game out. They're not really integral to the story. I've just started my second playthrough, which I will get onto very shortly. And I'm trying not to do any of the side quests in that, to just kind of push my way back through the game in order to chase some of the achievements you have to get, because strangely the achievements in the game, some of them actually require you not to play certain parts of the game, if that makes sense. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. So while there were downsides to playing the game, like I mentioned a second ago, I have recently started my second playthrough, which is where some of the footage in the background has been coming from.
So, what do we do?
To basically go through and
take cover behind that debris.
Achievements. So what I really want to talk about is the difference in some of the story from the original.
We gotta take it out quicker. We're
mainly being kind of, so at the start of the game you kind of work your way through Reactor 1, and then after you've done Reactor 1 it's all kind of similar to the original, only you do kind of feel, and I think I mentioned this in my playthrough of the demo as well, you do kind of feel a sense of urgency to the timing that you put on the bomb to escape from the reactor. There is a little bit of urgency to that, whereas in the original game I did feel like there wasn't. So after you've done that reactor you do escape and get to go up onto the plate, which is another thing that I had heard about leading up to the game, is that there would be areas of Midgard that you could go out and explore, which you hadn't been able to do previously. So with this you kind of got to go up out onto the plate rather than the slums, and you got to explore a little bit, but not a massive amount. It was basically the area where you meet Aerith, as she is called in this, rather than Ares, and that got a bit repetitive at that point, because it did kind of feel very linear, whereas I thought it was going to be a little bit more open as opposed to the original game, which was very linear. But I thought this might have a few different branches that you could take. So essentially, like I said, you do meet the Flower Girl, or Aerith as we know her, or Ares, whatever you want to call her. And we get an introduction to some weird ghosts. So those ghosts are actually called Whispers. Again, big spoiler warning. And they basically control people into fulfilling their own destinies, etc. And here's another big spoiler for you. So when Sephiroth kills Barrett very later on in the game, the Whispers revive Barrett because it wasn't his destiny to die on that day, and basically save his life. But in a lot of the game they basically hold you back from doing things because those events need to unfold in order to progress the storyline, so to speak. So after you kind of do all of the stuff up on the plate with meeting Aerith and then fighting all of the guards, you jump down onto the train again like you did in the original, work your way through the train, get back through to Sector 7. And then you make your way to 7th Heaven, which is Tifa's bar, which for some reason Barrett lives in with Marlene, but Tifa lives elsewhere. Just a small detail that I picked up. It's always been her bar. I don't understand the logic behind any of that. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I just wanted to mention it in this video. So when you get back to Sector 7, you basically get, it's late, and Tifa takes you to your house that you are being rented for free, which again is another new thing in this, which I thought they'd do more with. but they kind of didn't. It was literally just a place for you to rest if you ever got injured or anything, and just a way to kind of progress from night into day, which I mean was kind of a good thing to do, because it kind of gave a good sense that time had progressed.
You're not real.
And then you kind of wake up
dead.
the next morning and get told that you'll have to get your name out there. So you end up doing this seemingly endless stream of fetch quests that have basically been put into the game to stretch it out from the original 4 hours into 30. So without all of the side quests and things that you could do, I think that it would have been quite easy to get this game down from a 30-hour game to a 10-hour game, or they could have done something completely different and added more detail, maybe gave you a bit more time to explore, go up onto the plates, actually explore all of Midgar like they kind of teased that you would be able to.
The shiver of her flesh.
So yeah, there's a lot of little things that are happening in the Sector 7 slums. So there are some other things that happen in between there, including a couple of plot twists that I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to spoil the game overly. I know I've already dropped a few big ones, but I'm going to try not to drop any little ones that I think are interesting. So basically you end up going to the next reactor, which is a little bit of a spoiler in itself if you're not up to this part of the game or you haven't played the game. But if you haven't played the game, you shouldn't really be watching this video anyway, because I'm just ruining it for you. So at the next reactor in the original game, there was a wonderfully stress-inducing mini-game where you had to basically, Barrett and Tifa had to press buttons at the same time. That game has been pulled up to date and is included in the remake, so do not fear that. So after planting the bomb, or before planting the bomb, I can't remember off the top of my head, this reactor was incredibly repetitive and did feel a little bit like a chore to get through, because you had to go from kind of room to room, and it's at the end of this reactor that you fight the airbuster, which is a big robot thing, for those not familiar. I'm not going to go into detail, there's not that much point. But basically you have to make your way from room to room, and you get the opportunity to take things off it, so you basically downgrade its performance and therefore give yourself an advantage in the fight. I found it a little bit kind of, I quite enjoyed doing it at the time, but looking back at it, it did feel a bit kind of forced. But it was quite nice going through it for the first time, because I didn't know what everything did that I was taking off it, so I didn't know which was better to, say, reduce its speed or whether to reduce its armor. Would it be better if it didn't attack me quicker, or would it be better if my attacks did more damage to it? And then you could take its special weapons off it. Did those special weapons actually do enough damage to me to warrant taking them off, as opposed to, say, lowering its armor, etc. So that was something that I found actually quite interesting to do, but a little bit repetitive after a while. Again, it was the kind of thing that felt like it had been put in just to bulk things out a little bit. So I'm obviously not going to go through the full game in this video, because that would just be stupid. I might one day, when the game's a bit older, do a full playthrough on a weekly basis, but I'm not sure at this moment, because each video being half an hour long at 30 hours, you're looking about a year of just Final Fantasy VII, which I wouldn't mind, but I don't know what's coming up later this year in terms of my channel yet, so who knows. So a few other things that I wanted to talk about that I didn't enjoy with this game.
Just be ready for the next mission, all right?
So during the church area, just after you've met Aerith, in the original game you kind of pushed barrels over the side to help Aerith get away from Shinra guards. In this, you have to dangle from the ceiling and monkey bar your way across to a chandelier, cut the chandelier down, and then that's done. Now, there are some games that are designed to be platformers, and there are some games that are designed to be RPGs. There are some games that have like an element of everything in them. But I'm not sure what the programmers were thinking when they did it, because it feels so clumsy doing the monkey bar thing, because you have to turn and then the camera doesn't turn properly, and then you have to come over one space because you've gone too far because you couldn't see where you were going, or at least that's what I found anyway. So that I thought was quite frustrating and not really needed to be in the game. It would have been much better even for nostalgia's sake at least, to keep in the barrel pushing, which could have been made into a lot bigger kind of thing as well. So shortly after that I did experience a few very minor graphical issues as well, which was a little bit of a shame, especially since the game got delayed so much because they were trying to polish it and make it perfect. That was a bit of a shame. So those are some of the things that I didn't like about the game, but now it's time for the things that I did. So we've got the weapon system and the weapons upgrading system, which was fantastic. I thought it was lovely that you could go through the entire game with the Buster Sword if you really wanted to, because you could just keep upgrading it and be able to deal with enemies that you go up against still as well. It'd kind of match power for power. I know this for a fact because I switched back to the Buster Sword to do the final mission of the game in my playthrough, just so that if I did have to fight Sephiroth, I could do it with the Buster Sword. So that was a lot of fun. So yeah, there was that. The weapon upgrading system was good. There was the materia system works very well as well. I like the fact that you can see the materia in the weapons. On that note, I was a little bit disappointed because when you upgrade weapons, you can add more materia slots to them. So the Buster Sword actually ends up with, I think it's 4 slots on it, or at least it did with the one that I had, but it still only had the 2 slots actually shown on the weapon. So some of the things that I enjoyed are the character interactions, specifically. There was a lot of nice dialogue in there that just kind of kept the story moving and was just quite nice, and it was fluid and it worked well. So that was nice as well. Other parts that I liked in this version of the game were, I quite liked the way that limit breaks worked. It didn't seem like they were overpowered too much, and there was a chance of them missing as well, as I found out on several occasions. Speaking of things that have to charge up, though, I don't know whether it was because on my first playthrough, I played through on easy mode purely because I wanted to just experience the story in its fullest and just enjoy the game, basically. So I don't know whether it's because I had it on the easy setting or whether it's because that's just how they work, but the summons didn't seem to charge up in time for me to actually make full use of them in fights. So I don't know, I'm assuming that that's because I was playing in easy mode, but because of that I would have thought in easy mode they would have charged up quicker to allow you to be able to use them more to make fights easier. I don't know. Some other things that I enjoyed that were different in this game than were in the original game were so we had the sewers as well a little bit later on in the game from where we were discussing a moment ago. So you had the sewers where you fell down and you had to open kind of sluice gates to allow water to flow out and water to flow in order to progress through. So that was a nice little puzzle aspect there. And then it moved on to the train graveyard, which in the original was probably a 15-20 minute run. I think it took me around 2 hours, maybe even 3 to get through the train graveyard in the remake. I thought that it was going to be frustrating because I'd heard that it was going to be a lot longer, but I think the train graveyard was probably one of my most favourite parts of the remake, so that was a lot of fun. Shortly after that you get onto the section where they're going to cut the pillar and drop the plate of Sector 7 down onto the slums in a bid to try and get rid of Avalanche, the terrorist organisation you're a member of. In the original game, as far as I can remember, there was a little bit of a kind of, oh, they're going to do this, right, okay, so we better go and stop them doing that. And then you kind of get there and it's oh, they're doing this to get rid of Avalanche. But in this, in the remake, they put a lot more emphasis on the fact that they're trying to set up Avalanche, essentially, saying that it's Avalanche that are trying to destroy the pillar and drop the plate so that they take the blame, and Shinra looks like the good guys as they're attacking Avalanche, who are actually there trying to stop Shinra from destroying the pillar. So there was a lot of emphasis on that, and I thought that was quite a nice little thing that had been put into it, just to kind of make it a little bit more real. And then after that, with that pillar coming down, everything got very emotional around that time in the game, and it did feel kind of heartbreaking, and it did really speak to you. So they did really well with that section. I mean, after that though, there was a lot of mini games and there was a lot of repetitive gameplay, which I suppose moves us on to, we're going to talk about War Market a little bit. So War Market had all of the original mini games that it had before. So it had the, well, it didn't have all of them. It had the squats challenge, which I couldn't get to grips with because it's a little bit more difficult in this than it is in the original. There also is a pull-up challenge there as well later on. So I want to talk for a minute about Cloud's dress. So Cloud has, first of all, 3 different dresses that he can get in this game. Something I didn't find out until after the fact. So regardless of what dress it is, the owner of the dress shop basically has nothing to do with it. And you basically end up going through the entire transformation in the Honeybee Inn as a rhythm action game, pressing buttons in time and making sure that you press them correctly at the right time. And to be honest, I was focusing so much on getting the timing right, I didn't get to enjoy the actual kind of sequence that was happening in the background, which I think would have been a little bit spectacular. Again, not going to go into too much detail about that because I don't want to ruin it for people who are just here wanting to know what I think of the game. So after that, a little bit later on, you're looking back at Shinra Tower, climbing up that, going through all of that. A lot of that is different as well. But I think rather than me just banging on and on about all the things that are different, I'll just a couple more things that have been added in just to bulk out the game. And then I'll wrap this video up, I think. So added into this, you do have a Colosseum that is underneath Wall Market, which does pass a little bit of time.
That went well.
So you basically go down there and you fight enemies like in the original game when you go to Gold Saucer and you have the battle arena. Again, when you get up to, I think it's the 64th floor in Shinra Tower, or possibly the 63rd, can't remember off the top of my head, but once you get up there you get to the R&D department, not the R&D, R&R, and you can have a little bit of a rest by taking part in simulated battles in their version of the battle arena as well. Which is essentially a training facility, but for some reason it's in the R&R area, which is essentially the staff room. Both of those you have to do in order to get the to get all of the enemy skills from the enemy skill material, which is also included in the game. And you also need to have already completed the game as well to get some of one of those, because you need to then have unlocked hard mode, which is incredibly hard, and that was a very, very silly mistake on me to think, oh, I'll jump into the middle of the game in hard mode. It won't be that bad. It is. So I might, once I've completed it on normal, I might go through it again on hard and just see what happens. So all in all, down to the brass tacks, Final Fantasy VII The Remake, is it a good game? Yes. But don't come into it as a Final Fantasy VII fan thinking it's going to be the same as the original or just as good as the original. What you have to do is you have to come into this game, you have to come into Final Fantasy VII The Remake, and you have to look at it like it's a brand new game that is not associated with Final Fantasy VII at all, and it just so happens to share some of the character names. If you kind of look at it like that, then you're not going to be disappointed by the fact that the story's a bit different, or that the characters that you once knew and loved weren't the same. And most of all, you won't be as pissed off when Cait Sith turns up. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble on. If you have played the game and enjoyed it, then fair enough, you're allowed to enjoy it. I enjoyed it. I may have just been rambling on about how much it was not as good as the first one, but I did really enjoy playing it. If you've not played the game and you've watched this video to try and find out what the game is about, it was a bit of a silly idea, but never mind, it's done now. So thank you very much for watching. Please do like, share and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.